technically speaking, GitHub Copilot really does not have a clue what language you're writing in. It's more like an autocomplete on steroid, trying to predict what text you want to have. So with everything into context, then can generate some suggestions that you may like. And usually there are some options. Then you can click on the arrow to go through the different options that you may or may not like and pick the one that you like. And then and go from there. So a lot of time.
ColdFusion Alive, the podcast for the ColdFusion community. Discover practices, tools, techniques, tips and trends for modern ColdFusion development. Brought to you by TerraTech, the ColdFusion experts. Develop, secure, optimize. Here is your host, the founder of TerraTech, Michaela Light.
Welcome back to the show. I'm here with Monte Chan from CF Web Tools, and we're going to be talking about an exciting new AI tool for ColdFusion, and other languages, which is GitHub Copilot. Welcome, Monte.
Oh, thank you. It's always a big fan of this podcast, and it's a great honor to be on this podcast.
I'm glad we finally got you on. I noticed you were posting on your LinkedIn about the CF Summit talk you gave on using Copilot with ColdFusion. I thought, I've got to get this guy on. This is so cool. So if you don't know Monte, he's been doing ColdFusion since ColdFusion 4.5 back in the late 90s. And he's developed applications for all kinds of industry, education, health insurance, church websites, fintech, many others. He used to be the co-manager of the Alamo ColdFusion user group. I guess that's in Texas, right?
Yes, San Antonio, Texas.
Yeah, but he's joining us today from Hong Kong, where he's visiting his family. And he was telling me that before they moved the airport there, that his grandfather's apartment there used to be right next to the airport, and they could watch planes actually below the apartment building coming in, because the planes used to wiggle around the skyscrapers there in Hong Kong. So quite exciting.
Yes.
Though. Yeah. So I guess we ought to start off, for people who don't know what Copilot is. What is GitHub Copilot?
It is an AI paired programming tool. So it helps as you're programming. It basically, there's another person, but in this case, it's a AI tool, if you will. So, but you would be doing most of the typing, but then they would also give you some code suggestions, if you will, and to help you with coding. So sometimes can be a short one-liner, or could be one whole block of codes. So it can save a lot of typing.
So it actually will type some code for you, or
yes.
When you say pair programming, does it also look at the code you've written and make suggestions for improvement?
Oh yes. It would actually take into the tab that you open, the file name of the file that you're currently editing, or the links to the files that, let's say you have some existing codes already, and it may be linking to certain files, or some other files linking back to this one, to take everything into context to give you a more accurate code. I wouldn't call that code generation, because technically speaking, GitHub Copilot really does not have a clue what language you're writing in. It's more like an autocomplete on steroid, trying to predict what text you want to have. So with everything into context, then can generate some suggestions that you may like. And usually there are some options. Then you can click on the arrow to go through the different options that you may or may not like, and pick the one that you like, and then and go from there. So a lot of times you actually don't need to make a whole lot of modifications, but sometimes you do, because again, keep in mind that it does not have a clue what language you're writing in. So sometimes the stuff that it generates So for example, the function may not exist, the variable may not exist. So it's just, so you do need to pay attention to the actual text. But I would say, based on my experience, it's 99% accurate.
Wow, that sounds incredibly exciting, and what a time saver. Just like for those of us who can remember using Notepad to write ColdFusion code before there were modern editors with autocomplete, autocomplete and, being able to look up the syntax while you're coding is such a time saver. This takes it to a whole other level. So very exciting development. And we'll do a short demo for those following on the video, and we'll talk it through for those listening on the audio later, so you can actually see and hear a game by game play of using GitHub Auto Copilot with ColdFusion. But before we do that, do you have to use GitHub is now owned by Microsoft, is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. So do you have to use the Microsoft editor VS Code to use this, or Visual
no,
Studio,
there are
or some
actually a list of IDEs that is currently supports. VS Code is obviously one of them. Visual Studio Code, and then there's also a list of JetBrains compatible IDEs, and also NeoVim and Vim. And so for a list of the IDEs that this extension supports, you can just do a Google search and, like, say, GitHub Copilot IDEs or something like that, and you should be able to see a link of that.
I'll put a link in to the currently supported ones from the GitHub website. But I think you gave a pretty comprehensive list right there. So, you're using, and just to mention to the people listening, VS Code is like the most, in our annual State of the ColdFusion Union survey, VS Code is used by about 60% of ColdFusion developers at this point. It is a really great open source, mostly open source editor. There's like a teeny bit of it that's still proprietary from Microsoft, unless you use the open source forked version of it. But it's a really great editor. Has a lot of features, a lot of plugins for ColdFusion. So, maybe this is a reason to try out VS Code if you've been on the fence on it. And I don't know if this is true, but I'm imagining if you're really into another IDE, I'm imagining there's some kind of API that lets you hook into an IDE Copilot. So I've got to imagine that's how it works. There's some kind of plugin or
yes. So you basically install an extension, and and then you go from there. But you do need, because it is GitHub Copilot, so you do need to have a GitHub account in order to activate the extension.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll talk a bit more about how to use it and what it costs later in the show.
Sure. But
I was trying to make a point that if you're a real fan of some other IDE, you could always write an extension to do this, assuming you're an extension writing coder, or maybe someone else will do it. You never know. So a lot of ColdFusion programmers and CIOs are listening to this. Why should they or their team be using Copilot?
Well, it's a big help as far as writing code is concerned. And like I said earlier, sometimes it can generate some code that's a big block of big chunk of codes. And in a sense, it also helps you to write better code, because to help GitHub Copilot generate better code, you sometimes need to make the variable name or function name a little bit more descriptive. So in a sense, it's more self-documentary. So when other people look at the code, they can see that, okay, this block of code is, or this file is dealing with whatever the cases may, whatever the topic may be. Maybe this is for customers, this is customer orders, or this is for, I don't know, payments for different things. So you would write the function name a bit more descriptive so you know which function is doing what. And so that would also in turn help with the result generated by GitHub Copilot as well.
So you need to prompt it with good variable names, or does it come up with good variable names if you do that?
Say something descriptive instead of saying do stuff, or what stuff is it doing? So you would say, okay, this is so let's say you call a function, and the function name would be calculate sum with 2 integers or something like that. So you look at the function name, you know exactly what it does.
And then, are there any other benefits you've seen to using Copilot? Or
the big helps as far as saving time, because a lot of times it can generate a one big block of code instead of you typing line by line. You can just accept the whole thing and then just go through that and use that kind of as a template, if you will, and then so you modify the code from there.
That sounds exciting. Are there any reasons someone shouldn't use it?
I cannot think of any particular reason why one should not be using that, unless they are afraid of the AI. Then they may have a good reason to not use that. But other than that, I really cannot think of a reason why people should not be using that.
Well, how is the quality of the code?
As long as you're being descriptive in your say variable name, function name, and different things, I would say, like I said, 99%, or at least based on my experience, they are actually quite accurate and quite good. So
there's some risk that the code may not be totally correct.
Correct. There are some risk that the code may not be accurate, but as usual, you need to make sure you test your code. You cannot just take the generated code as is. And I cannot emphasize that enough, that keep in mind that GitHub Copilot it's not a compiler. It is simply trying to predict what text you want. And in that context, it really does not know what language you're writing in. So sometimes maybe missing a bracket, maybe like I said, the function name may not exist. So you do need to test your code before you say commit the code. If you take everything as it and no testing, a lot of times you may end up with something breaking.
So you described it earlier as an AI pair programming assistant, but the pair programmer doesn't really fully understand ColdFusion. It depends how much ColdFusion code it's being trained on, how much of your own code is exposed in other tabs or in that particular tab. And also my own experience of using AIs in different contexts is they can be very enthusiastic that their solution is correct, even when it's a complete lie. So like you said, they may make up functions that don't exist because they're really keen to solve the problem and predict the code you're trying to write. So
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because GitHub itself, the Copilot, this technology is trained on all the code that are available in the public repo. So because let's say, for example, say JavaScript or those, because there are a lot more public repos available. So the quality would be much better than say ColdFusion, because I guess relatively speaking, ColdFusion does not have a whole lot of public repo code available. So they can so GitHub Copilot can only be trained on what's available.
Now that brings up an interesting point. As well as writing ColdFusion code, will it write your JavaScript code as well?
Excuse me?
As well as writing ColdFusion code, can it write the JavaScript?
Oh yes, it can write with Java. You can do Java. You can do SQL. And it's not only ColdFusion. In fact, you can do PHP and .NET and few out many other languages too. So it's not only for ColdFusion. It can actually support a whole lot other stuff, CSS as well.
So if someone, this is where maybe a useful reason for a ColdFusion developer to use it. So I know some ColdFusion developers, CSS is not their strong point, for example, or SQL is not their strong point. And this can, I think a good use case for an AI at this point in time is when someone on the team, is weaker in one area of full stack, it can help strengthen them up. If someone is a senior developer and they already know ColdFusion really well and JavaScript and SQL code and CSS and what have you, yes, it will help you and it will speed things up, but it's not going to have as big a increase as it does for a more junior developer.
Absolutely, yes. Especially, so like you said, for one, a lot of times us being the developers, we're not exactly designers, so to speak. So when it comes to the CSS portions, we may or may not know a whole lot about how to do certain things. So GitHub Copilot definitely would help in those areas.
Now, is there any concern about, you said it's trained on publicly available code in GitHub. Is there any concern people express over, you're basically copying other people's code here, or there might be a copyright issue, or?
Yes, there are people who have mentioned that. And I do not have an answer to that particular question. And as far as I'm concerned, they are not exactly. Let's just say that I don't have an answer to that particular question. Yes, but there have been people having some concerns over the public repos code and some licensing issues.
Yeah. So, I mean, it depends on who you're, working. If you're doing your own open source project, maybe it doesn't matter that much.
Yes.
Because it's probably taking it from open source code.
Correct.
And cross your fingers. And first of all, it isn't copying other code. It's being inspired by other code to predict what the text is. So chances are what you're getting is not an exact copy. It's more like a merge of several different other people's code. It's similar things.
Yes.
And just philosophically, I'd make the point, how the heck do human programmers work? We read other people's code all the time. We're like, oh, that's how you do code this API, or that's how you do this kind of function in ColdFusion. And then you write your own version of it.
Exactly.
I think every programmer regards that as fair practice. You're inspired by reading books, by going to conferences, by reading other people's code, by Googling first for examples to see how something's done, and then you write your own version of it. And I haven't heard anyone complain about human programmers doing that. So why do we complain about AI?
Exactly.
A similar thing. However, having said that, if you're working for, maybe a big corporation or a government office, they may be a bit more concerned about, hey, where's this code coming from?
Yes.
This podcast is brought to you by TerraTech, the ColdFusion experts. Develop, secure, optimize. Get detailed show notes on today's episode and your free CF Alive Modern ColdFusion Guide at terratech.com. That is TERATECH.com. And now back to today's show.
Yes, and on that note, maybe we might get to that later, but for the GitHub Copilot, there are two different licenses. For the business licenses, you can actually configure that the generated result would not be coming from anything from the public repo, but you can restrict that to only within the corporate code, if you will.
So you could restrict your own corporation's code base.
Correct, yes. But that's only available for the business license.
Well, that's an interesting feature. So that totally avoids this issue.
Correct.
Then you're only using code that your organization owns.
Yes, correct.
The downside to doing that, of course, is that it may not be quite as good code that if you open it up to worldwide.
Yes, so you give some, you take some, so you kind of think about what you want to do and make adjustments accordingly.
And that would be coming from a private GitHub repo in your organization, I assume, not some public one.
Yes.
Because
correct.
Obviously, if you're a business or a government organization, you may not want all your code out on the internet.
Correct. Yes.
For various reasons.
So it would be just a repo within your organization. Yeah. So maybe chances are those would be private ones. So you just need to provide some kind of authentication, I would assume, to look at those code and then would be generate the suggested code based on what's in the private repos of the organization.
And it also, I guess, backing up a bit, you can, even if you don't use GitHub as your own repo for source control, you can still use Copilot. But for these more advanced features, you do kind of have to go into the Microsoft ecosystem and use Copilot, use GitHub as your repo.
Yes, but if you don't use GitHub as your repo and you use something else, then it would just look at the code based on your local file structure, but not so much getting from your GitHub repo, if you will.
So do you have any other tips for people using this, how to get more out of using Copilot?
Well, other than the key is just to be descriptive in as far as the function names, variable names, and just keep the structures, a certain structure. Like let's say if you do ColdFusion in an object-oriented way, then you do the get and set functions, and then keep the function names consistent. Then that would help GitHub Copilot quite a bit as far as when it comes to generating code. Instead of doing things rather randomly, then it's kind of hard for GitHub Copilot, because I noticed that GitHub Copilot go by some kind of pattern. So if you keep certain patterns, GitHub Copilot actually would notice those patterns. But if you just do everything in random, then make things a lot more difficult when it comes to GitHub Copilot, because Copilot really does not have a clue what exactly you're trying to do.
Yes, it's kind of, I don't know what a polite way to put this is, but it's kind of an intelligent idiot. It's very well trained on a lot of code, but it doesn't totally understand what's going on. And I'm reminded of the movie, I think it was called Rain Man, that had Tom Cruise, Dustin Hoffman in. And Dustin Hoffman is this autistic genius, but he doesn't really totally. And for example, he can play blackjack and count every single card in a 6-card deck of blackjack. And yet he doesn't really understand the point of like betting to make money. So he's betting $1 or $2, where Tom Cruise is betting tens of thousands of dollars.
Yes.
And then at one point he gets bored and walks away from the table, at which point Tom Cruise loses his money. But the point I'm trying to make is that we call it an AI, which stands for artificial intelligence. Maybe intelligence is a bit of a strong term here. It's kind of, you've talked about it being predictive text, or, they talk about large language learning models as another description of these things. And it can behave in intelligent ways, but it doesn't always understand the code it's generating. It never understands the code it's generating.
Correct. Yes.
So you still need a human in the loop.
Absolutely.
Now, that doesn't mean these things may not improve over time.
Correct. Yes. For now, things might work this way, but given enough technology, enough research, we'll probably get better over time. Yes.
Yeah. And then I guess another thought here is, a number of ColdFusion developers do publish ColdFusion code into GitHub public repos. Maybe if more of us do that, when we've written some cool stuff.
Absolutely. Since the GitHub Copilot is trained on the public, the code in public repos. So the more of us publish code in the public repos, then the better it is. I don't know, and I did actually try to look up how frequently GitHub Copilot is being trained, and I could not find just how frequently they do that. So however frequently they do that, but the more code that we have available out there, the better it is for the community, or even for GitHub Copilot to actually get better quality on code, on the codes.
I don't know. I mean, just going by analogy on how often Google and other search engines have bots that go through the web and scan websites for new material, I've got to imagine Microsoft is, scanning GitHub for new code. And given that they own GitHub and they actually can know when new code is committed, it may be they trigger it every time on the one level, maybe every time new code is committed, it gets pushed into a queue to be sucked into Copilot. On the other end of the spectrum, maybe they have a frequency that every month or every 6 months or whatever the time period is, they just scan everything, pull it in. So it is an interesting question. And I'll see if I can find anything on that. All I can find now is Google tells me Copilot was trained on billions of lines of code.
Yes, but it does not tell you how frequently they do so.
Yeah. If anyone listening knows the answer to that question, please stick it in the comments or drop me an email and I'll update the show notes with it. And I'm curious. I'll see if I can find the answer to that question. So maybe it would make sense for us to do a short demo of this. I am aware that some people listen on iTunes or other audio services. So we'll do a game-by-game play of what we're seeing on the video. For the people on YouTube, obviously you can see the video. If you can share your screen, it's that little green
absolutely
share screen. And if you can set the font size on your IDE to be super large, more larger than, many developers I've seen have enormous computer screens and the font is tiny and it doesn't come out so good on YouTube. So I want to make life easy for the folks at home who are watching this.
Okay. Let's see.
And while we're getting that up, I just want to tell you, this thing isn't that expensive. We'll get fully into the pricing, but, a few cups of coffee a month would pay the subscription. And we'll also talk about what's coming in the future for Copilot, because Microsoft has just announced a whole bunch of other future improvements. And they're also rolling out Copilot to other Microsoft tools. So we may talk about that if we have time. And certainly I'd like to talk about other AI tools that are available for ColdFusion. So lots of exciting things coming up.
Absolutely.
So yeah, let's get that demo loaded and I'll talk it through for people listening on audio. You're welcome to say anything you want about it. Let's share your screen. And you're using VS Code, I think. Yes. And this is some code. So you've got a very exciting function here called calculate sum of two integers.cfm.
Yes.
As a demo.
And so once.
And so you're using a really descriptive name to help Copilot here and to help self-document the code.
Yes, exactly. So assuming that you have installed GitHub Copilot extension, once it is installed successfully, you will see this little icon at the bottom right.
Can you hover over that icon and I'll describe it?
Yes.
Because I'm not seeing where you're
at the bottom right corner, you see the Show Copilot status menu.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that little icon is right there. So if you go to GitHub Copilot website, that is supposed to be an alien-looking thing with a pair of eyeglasses on top of his helmet-looking thing. This is what it's supposed to be.
Okay.
Yes. And then there is I would say about a few months ago, GitHub actually announced something called GitHub Copilot X. The X there is not a Roman numeral, but it's more like serve as a placeholder. Basically, GitHub wants to use the Copilot technology in different aspects of doing programming. So you can do that. So you can go to extensions and search for GitHub Copilot, and you will see a list of GitHub Copilot relating extensions. So there's the GitHub Copilot chat. GitHub Copilot chat is more like a ChatGPT type of functionality, but because this is within the IDE, so this chat actually knows all the tabs that you have opened, all the files that you have opened. So when it generates the responses, it keep in mind with all the stuff that you have opened. So it helps with providing you with the response. There's a GitHub Copilot Labs, which is basically for GitHub to have some kind of experimental functionality so you can play around with. And then GitHub Copilot Voice. For GitHub Copilot Voice, right now, you do need to join a wait list and wait for the approval before you can actually use the extension. But this Copilot Voice is supposedly allow you to use the natural languages to write code so you will speak it. So it helps a lot with people with mobility issues. So you can speak it, but by speaking it, you are not saying that, you don't say for I equals 0, I less than 12, I plus plus, not like that, but more like write a loop to go through an array 3 times to display something, and then we'll actually write the code for you. Right now, I have actually joined this wait list for about a month already, and I'm still waiting for the approval, so I cannot do a demo on this one. But for the most part, I can do a quick little demo for the Copilot itself and a little bit for the chat. So the
only one you actually need here is the GitHub Copilot extension.
Yes, the GitHub Copilot is the base for everything else.
And to install that, you have to have a GitHub account, either the 30-day trial account or the paid account.
Yes. So with the GitHub account, for the GitHub Copilot itself, this extension, it gives you a one-time 30-day trial. So after the 30-day trial is over, and if you still want to continue using it, then you will need to pay for that with either an individual license or the business license. The individual license is $10 a month, and for the business license, it's $19 per month per user. Okay. And so for the business, you do get certain things that the individuals won't let you do. For example, like we said earlier, for the business license, you get to configure whether to return the responses, returns the responses based on the code found in the public repo, or should it be only looking at your organization's repositories? And then you can, with the business license, you can also assign seats, either on the team level or on the individual level. And you can also, let's say, if your corporation has some kind of corporate VPN, you can configure your GitHub Copilot to work within that VPN as well.
Cool.
Okay. So let's say, so now I have this file called calculate sum of two integers, so be descriptive. So basically, I'm trying to write
so you've
a
got
function
a comment in here, and you're gonna,
yes.
got // right.
Yes, so you can start by writing a comment about what you want to do. Let's say you say write a function that,
Now I can see it's already auto-completing the description of what you want to do.
Yes. So you see these suggestive text. These are in opaque color. So if there are different options, you can go through the arrow to say next. But in this case, we are not picking the string. So we don't have, if we don't like it, we just keep on typing until it shows something that we want. Takes in two integers and return the sum.
Now, that format you had there with the // that's not a normal ColdFusion comment escape character.
Correct. Correct.
So that's what you use in Copilot, or is that some other convention I'm not familiar with?
Correct. In Copilot, I find that this works. But you can certainly try many. I by no means am I saying that this is the only way to get things to work. You are more than welcome to try different things on your own and see which one that works. And so in this case, it generates a function. And if you like that, you can just hit the tab to take that.
So for those listening on audio, after writing that description of what the function needs to do, Copilot gave a suggestion with the function name, add two numbers, which it came up with that, parameters number 1, number 2, and then return number 1 plus number 2. Looks, to my eye, seem tactically correct, but you've got a better eye for this, Monte.
Well, yes, it is actually correct, exactly like what you said. And the function, and also this comment is rather forgiving. You can have, let's say now I delete that function, okay? And let's say if I I have a typo in the word integers, instead of GRS, I said GIRS. So this is technically, it's a wrong word. Okay, but let's say if I were to do that. Okay. And then we'll still write exactly the same thing. Are you having
to click a button to get it to regenerate the code?
Yeah, so sometimes you do need to hit enter or something to know to, sometimes you do need to hit enter or do something to prompt the Copilot saying that, this is the end of comment, or this is the end of something, or sometimes you even need to start typing the word function. In this case, in this case, it actually generates the functions, but sometimes Copilot may think that you want to keep on writing comments. So instead of generating a function, it will generate another line of comments. So sometimes you do need to poke it, so to speak, to let Copilot know that you actually want to write the function.
Okay, and here in this case, picked up that you misspelled the word integer and it understood what you meant. And it's very similar to Google search or ChatGPT, that if you mistype things, it often figures out what you really meant.
Yes.
Because again, it's doing predictive text, and in millions of cases where people will mistype a word, that's what they meant, and so it predicts what you wanted.
Yes. And for this comment, you actually don't even have to write that in English. You can write that in any other natural languages at all.
Really? You can write it in French or German? Or
I can write that in Chinese.
Then you'll end up with predictive Chinese coding solutions.
So in this case, let's say.
Oh, you're writing one in Chinese. I am not going to be able to speak to the readers what this
That's
Chinese
okay.
says.
So this, I would
sorry.
say, this would be the exactly equivalent to the English text.
Yes.
And then, so let's say if I were to hit enter, like I said, sometimes the things that you still want to write comments. So for those who may not be able to see the screen right now, what the screen shows is just another line of comment, but in English saying write a function that takes in 2 integers, which is exactly the same as the English text. Yes. So, but in this case, I want an actual function. So let me change it back to English. So sometimes that's what I meant. I actually typed the word function to poke Copilot, if you will,
when you were
indicate
typing
that I want a function.
When you were typing that, the regular VS Code auto completion was coming up. I mean, just to make this point to people listening, it's not like Copilot is a new tool or a new IDE. It's an extension you use in your existing IDE. So you've got all the power of your existing IDE plus your superpower of large chunks of code being auto-completed for you.
Yes.
You can then edit.
Yes. So then, and as you can see, for those who cannot see on the right, what it generates is exactly the same as the function generated when I wrote the comment in English.
Yeah. So you can write your requirements. So I call this the requirement or the comment in any human language, and it will figure it out.
Correct. And even the comment itself can have mixed languages. You don't have to write that everything in Chinese or everything in English. You can have mixed Chinese, English, mixed with all kinds of different languages within one sentence, and it will still work.
Now, this is great. Also, you know, I have dyslexia, so I tend to write English a bit weird. I'm very grateful for grammar checkers and spell checkers, but if I'm writing this and my English isn't grammatically correct, you know, as long as the intention of the function is there, it's going to figure it out.
Yes. So let me delete this Chinese one. Let's just say that I want to, I'm writing a comment and say output the results of the function. Okay. So then just set write output, add 2 numbers, which is the name of the function, and just put in 2 numbers, so just 1 and 2. Okay. So let's say I save that.
It understood that to output to the screen, it needs to use the ColdFusion function write output, or that's one way to do it.
Yes. And then so I have a command box started already. And so I call that calculate integers 1.cfm. And as expected is displaying 3 because that's the sum of 1 and 2. Okay. And earlier I mentioned that GitHub Copilot chat. So if you have actually installed chat, then you will see this little icon here on the left. Looks like have 2 dialog boxes on top of each other, like one smaller one and one bigger one. And you can ask Copilot by typing, but here it is only designed to return anything that has to do with programming. So if you ask something, say, do you know the way to San Jose? And it will tell you kindly saying that, sorry, but I can only assist with programming related questions. So you can only ask questions that are programming related.
Oh, okay. But you could ask it, make some code for a certain
correct. Yes.
tool.
So let's say you can say let's just try the same thing here. Instead doing the comment, I just write a function that takes in two integers and returns the sum. Okay, so this is exactly the same and also gives a little bit description of what the generator code did. So from here, you have a few options. You can either copy, or you have an option to insert a cursor. Let's say my cursor is right here. I can just click that and we'll just put everything in here. Or at least I should put that outside the CF script. So let's say like that. Then it will generate. It would actually just copy the text directly to your file at the place of your cursor. And sometimes,
now these are small test examples, but if you were really doing coding, it could be dozens of lines of code it's inserting.
Yes. And you can also, let's say after writing some code, maybe at the time you understand that, but maybe sometimes after a few months, and then you look at the code and you kind of wonder just exactly what those codes do. Or sometimes you come across some code written by another developers that you are not too sure what they are doing. You can actually highlight the code and do on a Mac would be Command I. And so I would assume that on a Windows would be Control I, or yes. And then a prompt would be displaying within the file where you at the end of those lines of code. And that is also equivalent to the chat here. So what you can do is please explain these lines. Okay. So
not sure I found that. So it says these are part of a ColdFusion markup language file. I think I knew that. The first line is a comment. I think I knew that as well.
Yes. Sometimes you do, I guess, because this function is a bit too simple. So if you have something a little bit more
complicated code someone else or even you had written some time ago and you weren't sure what it did, you could do that and it would explain what the code was doing to help you understand it.
Exactly. Yes.
That's very cool.
Sometimes you can even use that. Now, for the other one that it was working better, but because some of these features are still in kind of like a public beta version. So what you see now may or may not work later on. For example, one feature used to be working, but now it's not working quite well, it seems like that they have moved that to a different location, is fixing bugs. So let's say you have some code here, let's say remove the plus sign here. So obviously this would be an incorrect function. And so you can highlight the lines of code that you want to fix. Let's say sometimes you come across some code, you do the best you can, you simply cannot find what the problem might be. So you can highlight the code lines of code in questions and say, fix these lines or something like that. To section. Yes, as you can tell, sometimes this does not work too well, but in GitHub Copilot Labs.
So Labs is their newer version.
This little icon here. then there's something called, let's see. Within here, there's something called fix bug.
Oh.
Yes.
So if you have a bug in your code, you can highlight it.
Exactly. So you can highlight that and click that. But this fix bug feature only fixes some simple bugs.
Oh, shucks.
And yes. So you can click that and it should fix the bug. So as you can see, it added that plus sign right there, which is I had previously deleted. So this fix bugs feature is a good thing for fixing some simple bugs. Sometimes you can be looking at codes. I guess I can only speak for myself. A lot of times I could be staring at that the whole day long, only at somehow my mind works all of a sudden. Oh, I missed a semicolon. Some stupid stuff like that. So this fix bug sometimes can save you hours and hours of debugging time. Turn out to be something rather simple. Yes.
I see there's an option in the labs for test generation.
Yes. This test generation only works for TypeScript and JavaScript at this moment.
Oh, shucks. I was hoping it was going to write my test box script.
No, not at this moment. Maybe in the future it does. Yes. And also for this one, it has a language translation. And but for language translation, it does not have ColdFusion or Lucy on the list yet, but it has a lot of other things. So let's say you have some, let's say
we need to add ColdFusion into this list, I think.
Absolutely. We can talk to GitHub or talk to Microsoft to see whether they can add to that list. But it would be a good place to start. Let's say you come across some code, let's say in C# that you're not too sure what it does. You can say translate that to say PHP or something like that.
JavaScript would be the obvious closest thing to ColdFusion.
Yes.
CFScript is very similar to JavaScript.
Yes. So PHP is on the list.
So this might be some code you found through a Google search or some other way.
Yes.
Or in if you're using an API, maybe they have a sample that's in some other language, and you could use this, translate it to say JavaScript, hopefully eventually to ColdFusion.
Yes.
But that would get you a lot closer to where you need to be.
Exactly.
So that's a really cool feature.
Yes.
Is there anything else you want to show in the demo before we get back to the regular?
This is it for now. Yes.
Well, great. Very exciting. Obviously, it does some really cool things. Even in a simple example, we could see it was generating code. In a real life example, it could have been generating a lot more.
Yes,
code,
absolutely.
or explaining the code better.
Yes. And also because like I said, it takes your current files, your current file structure, everything into consideration. So theoretically, as you build your project more and more, there will be more files and more codes and all that within your file structures. Then as time goes by, the generated code would get better in quality because there are more files within your file structures for its own training, if you will. So it knows exactly in what context that you are writing the functions for, or writing the codes for. So yes, so in time, things could get better.
Cool. Excellent. All right, so let's unshare your screen.
Sure.
And then we'll be back. So you mentioned briefly the pricing. There's $10 a month for individuals after your 30-day trial, $19 a month per user per month.
Yes.
Which is, pretty similar to what you can pay for ChatGPT or Claude or various other AI tools. So it seems pretty reasonable. Now, has Copilot changed the way you code?
Because I want to use that, so I try to make things more keeping to the same standard or keeping to the same pattern. and that will help in for the GitHub Copilot to generate something that I can actually use. And so be descriptive. So not only that is better for Copilot, but also for me in the future, or for other fellow developers later on when they look at the code, they know it's kind of self-explanatory. And so sometimes you do need to look at the code, but at least looking at the function, looking at the variable names, they will have a better idea of what that section of the code is about. Yes.
Is there a risk there that if everyone on the team is using Copilot, all the code ends up being the same or looking the same?
I don't think so. I mean, because this is I wouldn't necessarily say the same per se, but at the same time, it's also keep the same standard, if you will. But
do you actually necessarily tell it your coding standards on capitalization or spacing or other things, or does it pick that up? It keeps
those in mind too, because in this quick, simple demo, I couldn't quite show that. But in my experience, it actually, let's say if I have the table name in snake cases, and keep in mind it does not only work for ColdFusion, it works for SQL as well. So when it generates the code, sometimes it would let's say if I have the table name in snake cases or camel cases, when it generates the code, it will also keep those in mind in generating the code as well.
And, a lot of people use the CF-Lint tool to achieve a similar standardization there. But this takes it to a different level.
Yes, it takes all those into account when it generates the codes.
If there's someone listening with a development team who's maybe new to AI-assisted coding, I'm assuming that there was a learning curve for you in picking this up. Would you give any advice to someone new to this on how to go about learning it and how much time it might take before you see the benefit?
I can say that when I started using GitHub Copilot, the first version ever that was released was back in October of 2021, if I remember correctly. And I actually started using that. At first, it did take a little bit getting used to of those opaque tags and all that. But as far as that part is concerned, it takes a little. It took me maybe about a week, roughly, for me to get used to how it works, hitting tab and all that. But once I would say the learning curve would not be too long, or at least based on my experience.
Well, it seems to me you can learn what to do, within an hour, maybe, but getting used to it may take longer.
Oh, yeah, getting used to that may take longer. Yes.
Now, what's coming in the future for Copilot? You mentioned there are some exciting new things coming out. What?
Yes, they announced something called GitHub Copilot X, and you can actually go to githubnext.com, and so to get a list of different things that are currently available and the stuff that are still working, so to speak. And so if you go to the githubnext.com, there's a list of projects, and it would tell you the statuses of different projects. Let me go to githubnext.com. So if you go down the projects, there's one called Code Atlas, which says it's napkin sketch. So at this moment, it's just a general idea. It does not have anything for you to do to actually sign up yet, but you can click on that to get an idea of what it does. And usually for all these different projects coming up, it would have a little demo, if you will, to show in general how things should work. And not everything has to do with Copilot, but for those that have to do with Copilot, the word Copilot is actually in the name. For example, there's a Copilot for docs. and that is currently has a wait list. So basically, you just need to sign up on the wait list. The actual wait time varies, so you just need to wait for that to be approved, and then you can start using that particular technology. So for Copilot for Docs, that would using Copilot technology to write documentations. You can do Copilot for pull requests, and there's Copilot for CLI, and there's Copilot Voice, and then there's what they call the GitHub Copilot Radar. You can just go on and on. There's a long list. You can go there and click on any of those and to get a better understanding on what that does. So I just click on, say, GitHub Copilot Radar. And then you can go down, and then they have some description of what it does. And so you can explore that yourself to see what each of those functionalities does.
Now, I noticed that when I went to the GitHub Copilot X website, and I put the link for that in the show notes at terratech.com. And it also has support for pull requests coming, and uses some of ChatGPT 4 features, because, of course, Microsoft has a big stake. I think it's 50% stake in OpenAI, who own ChatGPT. So in other words, they're improving it with a better language model. And on the pull requests, it says it will suggest descriptions for the pull requests and explain what the code change is actually doing, which is great, because sometimes I notice people don't always write the best descriptions in their pull requests.
Yes.
So it has some exciting things in there. I think I read somewhere, maybe I'm confused, but I thought I read that Microsoft was extending out Copilot to their other tools like Microsoft Word and Excel.
Yes, they are actually using the Copilot technology within all. To my understanding, based on the recent Microsoft conference, they are using Copilot in every Microsoft product that is available. And that was actually just that particular update in Windows was released sometime last week or two. And so I believe it's in essence, it's the same type of technology, but used that, say, in Microsoft Word, Outlook, and different things, or even in Bing.
So there, it might be helping you code macros in Excel or Word.
Yes, I would say so. Yes.
Or maybe doing other cool things. I'll put a link to that for folks interested in that aspect of it.
Sure.
Clearly Microsoft didn't spend billions of dollars to buy a minority stake in OpenAI.
Absolutely.
For nothing.
They will use this.
Yeah, they want to use this to pep up all their tools to keep them competitive.
Correct.
And integrate AI into, I don't know if it'll be into every single Microsoft offering, but obviously into a significant number of them. Maybe even SQL Server will get a Copilot AI thing in SQL Server Studio at some point.
Yes, that would be nice. Yes,
it would be nice. I was thinking that. So, we talked about the future with Copilot X. How do you see Copilot or other AI tools changing how ColdFusion developers work? Do you think they'll become integral to ColdFusion's evolution, or will it just be an add-on that some developers
I think that would be good. In fact, for those who actually attended the CF Summit in Vegas earlier this month, Mark Takata actually did a quick demo in the keynote of an AI version of Mark doing GitHub Copilot chat and essentially doing the same thing that I just did, but he did that with like writing a function defining a whole bunch of prime numbers or something like that. So that would help a lot in writing codes. Instead of writing line by line, we can just use GitHub Copilot. That would save a lot of times in terms of writing ColdFusion code or just programming in general.
So that was a great presentation that Mark did.
Yes.
I mean, I think in the short term, not everyone's going to use these tools just because the adoption curve on any tool, the early adopters jump in, but, late adopters may take years to pick up tools. I just see that. I mean, as you know, I do the whole CF Alive revolution movement, and I've been pushing for 5 years for people to use modern ColdFusion tools.
Yes.
Upgraded version of ColdFusion, and just make ColdFusion the modern programming language and ecosystem it can be with all the tools available. I saw you were using Command Box earlier in that demo. I didn't call it out then, but congrats to you for using Command Box.
Thank you.
And I recommend everyone use Command Box, but I just know from talking to people, not everyone does use Command Box, even though it's been out for years. And it saves so much time and makes your life easier, and it's free.
Yes,
and yet,
exactly.
Not everyone uses it, and I understand. Everyone's busy. They've got urgent, program requests or bugs to fix. They may not feel they have time to sharpen the saw and improve their tooling. But I think it's important these days. The changes are coming quicker and quicker. The pace of change is increasing. We can definitely see that this year. AI stuff only started this year. We're recording this episode at the end of October, where we're nearly 10 months into the year, and yet so much has changed in that time. And I think the epoch where you could not improve your ColdFusion programming skills and tooling is over, guys. You need to allocate some time every week to learn new stuff, even if it's only half an hour. And in the case of this Copilot, it could, really speed up your development process.
Oh, absolutely.
Other tools. I'll get off my soapbox now, Monty.
That's okay. That's okay. I was actually rather surprised when I was at the summit, when I did the presentation. Before I actually start the presentation, I just by the show of hands, I asked people to raise their hands if they were already using GitHub Copilot. There were, I would say, about 80 people showing up. Only maybe 4 or 5 people actually raised their hands. I was actually rather surprised by that, considering that the first release of Copilot was actually back in 2021, and now we're talking about 2023, so it's 2 years already. I was actually expecting a lot more people raising their hands, so I was actually rather surprised by only like 4 or 5 people raising their hands.
Yeah, I looked into this topic for another reason, the adoption curve and the pace of change. And, if you look back at previous technologies, like, for example, the automobile was invented in the 1890s. It really only became ubiquitous in the 1950s. That's a 60-year adoption curve between the early adopters and the people who like change, the people who pick up things in the middle, and then the late adopters finally pick it up. And if you look at other technology like the television, the telephone, the smartphone, the internet, Copilot, I guess, is a more recent example, or ChatGPT. Even now, even though the pace of change has sped up, it easily can be a 5 to 10 year adoption curve before everyone is using something.
Exactly. Yes.
So, there's often an echo chamber in technology, what's the latest cool technology? And we think everyone's using it, but it isn't true. There's a lot of people who are, they just have you and I are both passionate about new programming improvements and programming technology. attend conferences and, read articles and spend time outside of work just because we're interested in it.
Oh, yes.
But there are also people who just have a job and, maybe they have kids or other responsibilities, and it's hard for them to make time. But what I'm saying to you guys, hopefully some of them are listening to a podcast, they made time to listen to a podcast. Because this is the catch-22, right? The people who make time to listen to podcasts or listen to this are not the people who need to hear, not the only people who need to hear the message. And if anyone listening has suggestions on how we can reach ColdFusion developers who are maybe a bit behind the times, I'd love to hear them. Because otherwise they're just going to, get left further and further behind. And also, to be honest, when I've talked to people who are working on legacy apps, who are using, ColdFusion 9 or ColdFusion 10, yes, I know that's really old version, but people still use them.
Oh, yes.
It gets depressing,
Yes.
Learning a new technology helps invigorate our programming work practice. So,
yes.
All right, I step back on the soapbox there.
Oh, that's okay. You can keep going. I enjoy all your insights.
Well, you're inspiring me, Monty, because you.
Oh, thank you. That's a great honor. You were inspiring me too, with all the podcasts and all the different episodes. Big fan.
Yeah. Now there are some other AI coding tools out there. Fusion Reactor came out with an AI add-on to their performance monitoring tool for ColdFusion that can help diagnose performance bugs quicker. ChatGPT, a lot of developers use that, but as you mentioned earlier, you have to cut and paste into it, whereas Copilot, it reads the code in your IDE, even other tabs that you have open that are related. And then Google Bard also helps out with it. So there's a lot of AI, and there's probably a whole bunch of ones I'm not mentioning there.
To my understanding, AWS had one just coming out recently. It's called Code Whisperer, and that is free.
Oh, okay.
Yes, but that out of at least right now, it does not support ColdFusion or Lucy. But to that point, though, when GitHub Copilot was first released, they actually did not support ColdFusion or Lucy either. Now things are getting better. So hopefully, maybe AWS would be a better alternative after all it's free. Not sure, at least free for now. Maybe later on they may charge, I don't know.
Well, yes, they may charge. I'm always slightly cautious about free tools that don't charge, because then, our data is the price. That's how Gmail is, for example. They suck in all your emails and serve up ads based on what you've written in private emails. Which, there you go.
Yes.
Now let's wrap up the episode. Tell me why, it's 2023 when we're recording this. Why are you proud to be using ColdFusion? You've been using it for over 20 years now.
Yes, I'm actually rather. I am rather touched by the generosity of the ColdFusion community, especially when I was when I was a co-manager of the user group. There are a lot of people. Let's say Charlie, or Ray Camden, the Jedi himself, or Ben Adele, and a lot of different people. They were so eagerly to share their knowledge with us. And a lot of times especially when I was a co-manager, sometimes I was looking for different people to do some different presentations, and they would so eagerly step up and so readily to help us, and actually gave them all in their presentation. I was quite impressed by all that. Or even one time, that was even before I was involved in the user group thing. At that time, there was still something called SourceForge, I believe. That is way before the Forge box or anything like that. There used to be a site that we could upload our ColdFusion component that works with different things. At that time, I remember I believe Ray Camden was doing something with a Yahoo geocoder. And he created the first version of some ColdFusion function that could extract the information based on what's being returned from the Yahoo geocoder. For some reason, I had to do, at that time, the geocoder had a version 2 or something like that. But the function itself, what was in that source forge site did not have the updated version yet. So I asked Mr. Camden, hey, are you going to update that? And then he said, no, actually, if you want to update that, you can do that yourself. I said, okay, cool. And so I did some updates. I put an update on that website. And interestingly enough, there happened to be another gentleman who reached out to Mr. Camden because somehow that gentleman wanted to do a video demo of how to use that ColdFusion function or something like that. And Mr. Camden referred that gentleman to me. And then so he actually did, at that time, he actually made a YouTube video on how to use that ColdFusion components or ColdFusion function that I did. I was actually rather impressed by all that. There are actually nice people out there that are so eagerly to help the whole community to make things better. And so with all these different people, even when I go to the conferences and talk to different people, they are so eagerly to help you. Or even like on the Facebook, there's that ColdFusion programmers group. Whenever people ask a question, a lot of us would chime in with constructive and helpful information. I mean, what is there to complain? I mean, to me, I am just grateful that I'm even a part of this community. I'm just trying to do the little that I can do to make ColdFusion or the community better.
Well, I think you're doing a great job on
thank you very
sharing
much.
your knowledge. Monte.
Thank you.
And so what would it take to make ColdFusion even more alive this year?
Hopefully more people getting involved, more people sharing their knowledge. A lot of us who actually might have worked in ColdFusion for many years, we definitely have accumulated different knowledges, and by no means, there's no way for me to know everything there is to know about ColdFusion or any other different technology that can work with ColdFusion. So if all of us as a community as a whole can help each other, that would actually make us go stronger together. And that's how I feel that we can make CF more alive by more people contributing.
I think that's a great suggestion. I also want to add my own experiences. Whenever I teach a topic, I suddenly learn more subtleties and nuances about that topic by teaching it. It's a great way to master a topic by teaching it or sharing experience.
Yes, absolutely.
There is a selfish motive in doing that as well as an altruistic motive. So, and I understand. I used to be terrified of public speaking, or writing a blog or sharing stuff. And I understand a lot of people are nervous to share. I just encourage you to maybe share in smaller communities to start with. If there is a local user group near you, that's a great place to start. Or start a user group if you're in a big metro area, or start an online user group. I know there's a guy out in Hawaii. There weren't many people there around him, but he just said, I'm going to start a user group and do some online ones. So, there's many ways to do this, and you can take a small step in sharing. And the more you do it, the more confident you'll get. But you don't have to be confident in order to share. It's the point I'm trying to make. You just need to start out with some small sharings. And,
exactly.
You'll get better as you do it. So it sounds like you had a great time at CF Summit this year. What are you looking forward to at the next CF Summit you're going to? There's 3 of them this year. There's one in Washington, D.C., one in Las Vegas, and one in Bengaluru, India.
I don't think I would be able to go to the one in India, but
I was hoping when you were flying back from Hong Kong to the United States, you could stop off in India,
Yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it? But no, not unfortunately.
Timing's not quite right.
No, not unfortunately can't do that. But
Yes.
I will see. Hopefully, maybe the one in DC or even the one in Vegas next year. Looking forward to what else Adobe has in plan for ColdFusion. Yes. And hopefully
they'll have released Adobe ColdFusion 2024 by then, and they'll be planning Adobe ColdFusion 2025 at that point.
Yes. So hopefully there would be more with AI. I mean, based on Mark Takata's demo at the CF Summit, I would assume that there will be more coming with the AI relating technologies. And that's exciting. It's a good time to be alive. It's an even better time to be a ColdFusion developer right now.
Absolutely. Well, if people want to find you online, what are the best ways for people to connect with you?
Typically, I'm on Facebook. You can go to facebook.com/monte.chan. And you are more than welcome to add me, but please be sure to give me a quick message. And as far as how you find that, because I do get a lot of different friend requests from people that I don't necessarily know, and a lot of times those tend to be scammers.
Ooh, okay.
Yes, or something like that.
Mention that you're a ColdFusion developer.
Exactly. Mention that you're a ColdFusion developer or something like that. That would help. And you can, once you join Facebook, then you can actually send me a message within the messenger. That would be the better way to reach out to me if you want a quick response from me. And or you can actually email me at monte@monteandjenschan.com. But
I'm going to put that email and your Facebook in the show notes because your name is quite long.
Yes, I understand. Yes, thank you.
And you have a YouTube channel, I think, right?
Yes, I do have a YouTube channel. It's called Geek Talk 2004. The 2004 is just a number that somehow YouTube generated just to make the channel name unique. It does not mean that somehow it was created back in 2004.
I'll put the link to that in the show notes on the TerraTech site, along with your LinkedIn.
Sure. Thank you.
So great. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show today during your family trip.
Always a great honor. Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you on the podcast in the future, and or maybe see you talk at CF Summit or Into the Box or one of those other ColdFusion conferences. Sure. That one in Europe whose name is eluding me.
CF Camp?
CF Camp, that's right. How could I forget that name? We just wrote an article on that. So Great. All right. Well, thanks so much, Monte.
Thank you very much. And always a wonderful experience being on your podcast. Thank you.
Get detailed show notes on today's episode in your free CF Alive Modern ColdFusion Guide at terratech.com. That is TERATECH.com. Viva la CF Alive Revolution!